All right. Hey guys.
Hey.
um, so I have Drew, Levanti, and Scarlet. Is it Coote or Cote?
Coote.
Okay, I thought it was cute. Scarlet Coote with me right here, right now. Um, it's it's Wednesday, August 12th, and it's 5:59 p.m. over here in Los Angeles. We are all over the world,
Oh,
really.
really?
Um,
Um,
ooh, what is that? Okay, sorry. I started to hear I started to hear
yeah.
myself very loudly. Um, yeah, Drew's in the Chicago area, and Scarlett is all the way in Australia. It's tomorrow there, which is so weird. But I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and tell us more about them. They're two of my dear friends. We've become very close over quarantine, thanks to applications like House Party, and I guess Zoom too, and just like a group text, and we've just been talking a lot. And so I was really excited to ask them to be a part of this episode because we're talking about Mars today, and they're two people who I would consider Martians, like myself. And there's something about Martians, like when Mars ruled people, that we just get each other, and I think you'll see that through us talking about Mars. But yeah, so why don't you guys introduce yourselves? You can share your sun, moon, and rising if you're comfortable with that, and you can tell us about your astrology practice, and we'll get into how we all know each other. Drew, why don't you start?
Right, yeah, Aries Mars goes first, I guess. um, so I'm Drew. I'm an astrologer. I live in Chicago. I'm a Scorpio rising, Aries sun, hence the Martian comment, I guess. And I have a Leo moon as well. So yeah, I my astrology. I come from a Hellenistic background, but I think more and more there's so much mixing going on in the astrology community that I'm really inspired to talk to all different kinds of astrologers who do all different kinds of astrology, to blend things, and to see what we can learn from each other and what we might already be integrating without really realizing it just by being in community. So yeah, it's really exciting to be a part of this. As far as my practice goes, I focus I do natal astrology, and I also do electional. So I read birth charts, and then I help people time important things in their lives using elections. So yeah, that's me. And I guess that's all I'll say for now. I'm excited to talk about Mars.
Um, there's a lawnmower literally right outside my window. This has been going on for like an hour now. I really thought he was done. Um, but yeah, hold on one sec.
I think it's fine. I can't
You
hear
can't
it.
hear it?
I can't
Okay.
hear it coming through here, so I think it's fine.
Okay. Well, hopefully, I'm sorry to whoever edits this. Hopefully, it's not too bad. Um, And yeah, thank you for sharing up all of that. I feel like something that you didn't mention, and maybe I didn't ask you about your Mars placement, but not only are you a Scorpio rising and an Aries sun, but you have Mars conjunct your sun in Aries too.
Yeah, so I'm juiced up for sure. There's a lot of fire in my blood, much to the chagrin of some people that I get in verbal bouts with. But that's a story for another time.
I love that. Yeah, and I'm also a Sun Mars conjunction person, so yeah, there's just well, we'll get into it. We'll get into all of that. Let's Scarlett, you should introduce yourself. Yeah, tell us more about you.
Yeah, I'm Scarlet. I'm an Aries rising with Mars in Libra, Moon in Aquarius, and Sun in Leo. I'm an astrologer. I live in Sydney. Um, I've been studying for about 5 years. I started off with a more psychological and evolutionary approach to astrology. I was lucky enough to find an amazing teacher, Narelle, in Sydney, who was teaching at a natural therapies college called Nature Care College. And so I studied there for a year. And that was just like really amazing, formative experience for me. And then, yeah, I just kind of stayed committed to learning astrology. And I've studied with some other great teachers like Kelly Surtees and Austin Coppock. And through those two, mainly, I became more interested in like more traditional techniques of astrology. But like Drew, I'm kind of really interested in mixing as well. Yeah. And for my practice, I guess I'm still just discovering that at the moment, but I'm interested in how astrology can describe the quality of time and place us in time. And I love how it can reveal things and lead us to things that might have remained unknown or unacknowledged. And yeah, I just like that astrology returns me to myself, but also returns me to the universe as a part of that. And I would really like to explore that with other people as well. And yes, I do have a lot of Pisces astrology teachers.
I love that. One sec. All right. I mean, sorry about that, guys. There's a lot of lawn mowing action happening right now, right outside of where I'm sitting. So we had to pause for a bit, and it might start back up again. We don't know. We're talking about Mars. It's loud. It's Mercury Day. We're having a lot of and what is it? Intrusive sounds.
Interference.
Interference, yeah. And I guess with like Uranus stationing too, it doesn't help. But regardless, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, did you guys meet at NORWAC? Because I know I met each of you at NORWAC 2019. Is that how you guys met too?
Yes, Drew just like appeared. And then before I knew it, I was filming him in a pull-up competition in the NORWAC parking lot with Joe Gleason and Cam White. I think you won, so congrats on that.
Well, I think was Aries, so I mean, what do we expect?
Wait,
yeah.
Where were you doing pull-ups? Like on a tree? Oh my god. So Martian, holy shit. I love that.
Hey, that's the lesson of like a martial person, right? Like everything can be a competition if you try hard and believe in yourself.
Yes. And just so everyone knows, so I'm a Scorpio sun with Mars conjunct my sun and Pluto, and an Aries moon. So that's some context because I'm about to talk about when I met Drew at NORWAC, which I don't really remember the exact moment, but I do remember. You do? Okay, tell me.
Yeah, you were interviewing Cam we were just like in the same room, and you were talking to Cam about Pluto and Sag.
Okay, that's what I didn't know we met before then, because that's what I remember. Okay. Yeah, I was like, I need to learn more about Pluto and Sag, because I had all these thoughts about Pluto and Scorpio already. Obviously, I'm Pluto and Scorpio. And Scarlet, you are too, right?
Yes, I'm a Pluto and Scorpio, proudly.
Probably. Which means like, we're certified millennials. And that was when I started to like really just began to think about like what Pluto and Sag is like, and wanted to like talk to some youngins, just kidding, some Pluto and Sag people about how they perceived, that placement. And so I knew Cam was Pluto and Sag, and Cam and I, we just recorded yesterday, but that's going to be the second episode. And we were talking about meeting at NORWAC and kind of just like, I don't know, immediately being friends. Like it it was this weird thing where we were just like, oh, hey, it's you. And I think I had a lot of connections like that at Norwalk, where I just felt like I'd already known these people that I had not met before. But Drew was there, and I remember being immediately drawn to you, and being like, wait, what's your chart? And looked at your chart, and then we saw that your ascendant is conjunct my Mars. And then also seeing that you have like the Sun Mars conjunction in Aries, which is not too far off from my moon. And yeah, there was just some really nice synastry that we have. And so I was like, oh, okay, new friend. And then Scarlet, I guess we met at Norwalk too, but we had already been talking online, I think. Maybe not.
Yeah. No, I think
Yeah?
we were both like following each other on Twitter and like interacting through
mutuals.
there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I remember being like, oh, it's you, like Scarlet,
Yeah.
you're here from Australia.
I know, that's how I felt as well. I was like, oh my God, it's you in the flesh. That's like
yeah.
so many people like that I'd like been interacting with for a little while. And then it was so amazing to meet in person.
I know. It was so amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, even though we haven't seen each other since then, just that in-person like corporeality adds another layer to the interaction since then. So
yeah, definitely. Norwalk 2019 was something else. I feel like there was a lot of magic made, because I feel like every single person that I've interviewed so far on this, save for Sam Reynolds. Well, I didn't meet Sam for the first time in person at Norwalk. So I guess everyone that I've interviewed so far besides Ari Felix, I met at Norwalk 2019, which is like a lot. Yeah, I'm talking to Jason and Gabe tomorrow about Mercury, which will come out before this, but whatever. And those actually, Gabe was not a Norwalk person. I met Gabe in New York. But anyway, besides the point. The point is that Norwalk was a really big deal for a lot of us.
yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of magic was made there, and I have some hope that we can meet again in person next year, but if not, hopefully the year after that.
Jupiter's going to be in Pisces. It'll be good.
That's what I'm thinking, but we'll see. I wonder if Jupiter will be in Pisces for the next one too. I don't know.
Yeah,
it must be, right? Because it enters in like January 2022.
Yeah.
I just saw a hummingbird. Okay. So to pivot, let's start talking about Mars a little bit more. Let's talk about some general significations of Mars. Like, what does Mars look like in like a birth chart? Like, what is it astrologically? I think people immediately think, oh, Mars is the god of war, and Mars is about your anger and your aggression and your like people also commonly think, oh, it's your sex drive and your anger, and that's kind of what it is reduced down to often. Also things like your energy and your drive. Those are usually words that I'll use in association with Mars, but curious as to what comes to mind for you guys.
Yeah, I'll go first, I guess. I think, so whenever I introduce a planet, I want to just go back to basics with like a couple keywords. And the ones that I use for Mars following some of the Hellenistic revival is severing and separation. And also, so like in terms of severing and separating, you have these other phenomena like anger and conflict. And, when you get angry at somebody, you're separating from them. There's like this passion inside of you that creates division and repels. And so that's the kind of martial quality of experience that we can expect when you're having a Mars transit, or if Mars just comes up a lot for you in your chart. Like if you're a very martial dominant person, you might have experiences that have a a repelling quality or a separating quality to them. And with that, I think it's also important to remember that Mars is the natural opposite of Venus. So whereas Mars severs and separates, Venus unifies and reconciles. So Venus would want to have a discussion about what would be fair and what could bring people together if there's a dispute, as opposed to Mars, which is going to be much more aggressive, like you said, Kirah. There's more aggression, there's more passion, and when those individual ideas come up, we think of Mars with individuality, there is a natural repulsion. So like if you have the positive side of two magnets, they will naturally push each other apart. And Mars is that positive force that naturally repels things. So those are some of the things that I think about with Mars. You also have the temperament of Mars, which is hot and dry. Mars is extreme heat. So if you have Scarlett, do you want to talk about extreme heat, or what do you think about with Mars?
Yeah, I can talk about extreme heat. That's like something I often come back to when I'm thinking about the planets, is their temperament and what's their kind of inherent nature in that sense. So yeah, like you said, Mars is hot and dry, and it's intemperately hot and dry. And it's also has like a fiery quality to it. And so along with those keywords you gave of like severing and separating, another good Mars keyword is like burning, which is, you know, in its like chemical reaction, that is like separating atomic bonds. Like fire is the most swiftly and dramatically transformative element. And once you burn something, you can't really go back. Like there is no take backsies with Mars. It's often like that catalyzing moment of like, okay, I'm deciding to do this, where you're like breaking away from, you know, the other potential possibilities at that time and like following like a single-minded objective. So like burning something, you're like reducing it to ash, or you're like transforming it in some way, which I remember in class, Austin Kopic said something very simple but very evocative, I think, of Mars experiences, is that generally our subjective experience of being on fire is not a good one. It can be good, like heat is good, but it's intense. It's well, going back to what you were saying about intemperate heat, what we need to really transform something that is resistant to change is intemperate heat. Like if you want to make a sword, you need intemperate heat, and you also need to kind of, you put it into the flames and melt it down and combine it with other things to get it stronger, and then you beat it into shape as well. So I think sometimes martial experiences can often be moments when we're being forged, and our inner will and our what we're really capable of is very undeniable. Yeah.
I love that with being forged. That's such a cool image, and it makes me think of that idea of creation only emerging from the destruction of something else, or the reforming of something else. For anything new to be created, you have to depart from the previous thing that whatever that new thing was. So I think that's a really beautiful imagery. Think about the sword being forged. What a beautiful martial image.
Yeah. And I think that just takes me back to some of the very, very basic, like not even significations, but like correspondences when it comes to Mars that might just pop up just from looking at like the glyph of Mars. literally looks like a phallus or like a sword coming out of something. And also, like, if you look up at Mars in the sky, which you can actually do these days, surrounding its retrograde, if you look up, on the eastern horizon, a couple hours after sunset, you'll see a bright red star in the sky, and that's Mars. It's literally red.
Yeah.
And it's a dull sort of light. It's not super bright and shiny like Venus or Jupiter, but kind of like Saturn, it's a very dull, like kind of even brownish in color, but it is distinctly red. And even going even further, if you look at photographs of the planet Mars, there is this huge, ginormous ridge through the planet, and if you look at it, it looks like Mars. It looks like a battle wound, like a huge gash in the middle of the planet. And yeah, those things just kind of help paint the picture as to like the qualities of this planet. And I mean, what you guys said about what you guys were talking about with intemperate heat, and just like Mars bringing extreme heat and also extreme dryness, is really important when you're thinking about Mars, and also talking about its transits and what might come about from that. Um, yeah, how do you guys experience your Mars? I'm curious, because like we all have different expressions of it. Like Drew and I have Mars in domicile, while Scarlet has it in detriment. And we are going to go through all those different iterations, but I'm curious, like, for you and your particular charts, like how do you feel like you experience it?
Um, yeah, well, I'm Aries rising. And yeah, like you said, my Mars is in detriment, it's in Libra. So that means it's opposite my rising sign. It's in the seventh house. So Mars is a very important planet in my chart. And it's also it's angular, it rules my ascendant. It makes a lot of aspects to my inner planets as well. I think when I was younger, I wasn't so I think with Mars and Libra there is a bit of learning about like social cues and understanding those and having that affect how you express your will and express your power. I don't know, when I was a kid, I remember I was always speaking like back chatting to the teacher because I disagreed with something they said. So I think that like first seventh house Aries Libra polarity can be quite contrary sometimes. And what Drew was saying before about repulsion, like attraction and repulsion, like I really relate to that as an experience of just being like, oh, I'm going after something that's like going away from me, but now something's coming towards me and I instinctually flinch away. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's kind of like learning. If I also have my ascendant ruler in detriment, and I feel like there's this thing about like learning through contrast that happens with that, where it's like you kind of have to have an experience, like an extreme almost, and then the other extreme in order to figure out the balance in between them. Do you relate to that?
yeah, I relate to that a lot. Yeah, and I think like the first seventh house axis and like the Aries Libra axis, it's very like oppositional. So, and with that comes tension. So, and friction. I relate a lot to the experience of friction in life, as that for something to happen in my life, there needs to be a bit of friction. There needs to be a bit of like bumping up against the other or an event to get the fire started, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like that makes a lot of sense, because when I think of friction, I think of like the square aspect, and which is the square is the energy of Mars, really.
Yeah.
And so being Mars ruled, that makes a lot of sense that you would have to bump up against a lot of things. And, especially as an Aries rising, like that's what the Ram is all about, is like headbutting things head on,
Yes.
and then pulling back and seeing and assessing from there, I guess.
Yeah. I literally hit my head multiple times a day. It's something I noticed.
I have to ask, do you feel like, obviously, so Scarlet is a twin, and you guys, your charts are pretty similar. And so in terms of like, you guys weren't born that far apart. And I'm wondering if, like, obviously you probably wouldn't say the same about your twin, but do you see Mars showing up differently for her?
I think it functions in a very similar way. But just we have different experiences. But I think with Mars, like Mars is something that needs to be forged and needs to be worked on. So I think to the degree that you have those formative experiences that forge you says a lot about your experience of Mars. And I think we've both had different but similar forging experiences. I'd say mine have been a lot more in the realm of like bumping up against other people and relationships. But, because it rules the ascendant, there is still just like an element of what's like mirrored from what I experience in relationships is like kind of reflecting a lot of like the internal conflict inside as well. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Drew, how about you? How does Mars show up?
Yeah, I was thinking about that point about friction, and that makes so much sense, Scarlett, when you were talking about friction and your Mars in the 7th, and having to forge your Mars through that kind of conflict with others or bumping up against others. And I was thinking about that for myself because, I also experience friction, but I think a lot of times with Mars and Aries, I am the source of the friction, or I bring friction to others that they might not expect or be ready for. And so that's, I think, something with Mars and Aries is that there's, whereas like Mars and Libra, the fight comes to you. Mars and Aries, you are the fight, and you bring the fight, and that's something that I've definitely had a lot of learning around. On the other hand, I find that when I'm in situations that require conflict, where there is like a disconnect between me and another person around what we expect from each other, I'm very comfortable and capable of initiating that conversation and getting us basically having conflicts that are necessary. And that's also a factor in the fact that I have Mars conjunct Mercury. So those kind of verbal disputes or conversations that need to be had are pretty natural to me. And I really love having friends and just having people in my life who have different Marses, because it shows me that there are other ways to be, and that just because you have like a domicile placement doesn't mean that's like the right way to do it. Because I like I said, I have learned the hard way a lot of times that conflict is not the only answer, but also conflict can be very spiritual in terms of finding my own purpose and my own mission. If I have a disconnect with somebody, it's important to figure that out, because then I can proceed on whatever I'm supposed to be doing with my life. So I think Mars and Aries for me brings a lot of like mission and a feeling of purpose to my life, where I always feel like there's the next thing to be doing, or a battle to be won, or just going after an ideal. Actually, I think something that gets undersold with Mars sometimes is this idea of mission. And like, when you go to battle, it's not like you're just going to battle for the hell of it. Even though Mars might enjoy going to the battle for the hell of it, there usually is some deeper part of it where it's the purpose that you've chosen individually for yourself. So that's part of my experience and understanding of Mars.
I love that. Yeah, I really relate to that. I think just being like, I'm not Mars ruled in terms of my ascendant like you two are, but having it in Scorpio conjunct my sun, and therefore ruling both my sun and my moon in Aries, there is this sense of an underlying like mission that just is very like visceral. And yeah, I mean, I think I've maybe identified that for myself just like at a very core level, but um I would, well, I guess like to say something about having Mars, I'm not going to say too much because we're gonna get there, and I guess this is a good transition, I guess, to talking about Mars and domicile. But I feel like I really relate to the whole how do I say this? You know what? I'm gonna wait until let's talk about Mars and Aries, and I'll wait because I don't want to dive into it and then go back and then go forward.
Do you want to do a little like reset so that we can edit?
Yeah. Let me, hold on. I don't know what to do about that for the video, but no worries.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a really good transition point. I think talking about your Mars and Aries to talking about Mars and Aries in general, and what it means to have your Mars in domicile, or even just like right now, we're in a Mars and Aries transit, and we will be in it until the beginning of next year. So what does it look like to have or to experience Mars in Aries in its diurnal domicile? Yeah, why don't you jump in there, Drew, since you have it natally?
Yeah, well, I think it's like some of the things that I said, but I guess maybe to talk about the transit a little bit, and maybe how people can understand Mars and Aries through the transit. Just notice if you're finding yourself in more competitive situations, or situations where you have to really put yourself out there, like stick your neck out and be willing to fail also. I think Mars and Aries, Aries in general as an archetype, something that I've learned from Cameron Allen about this is this idea of trial and error, where Aries being the first sign does not naturally have the sort of thought out plan to success. Mars in Aries is very capable of achieving success, but it doesn't always get there the first time. It's kind of like, I forget whose analogy this is, but it's like Mars in Aries is the machine gun. It's just going to go brrr, and continue to fire. And so that can have a lot of good qualities where, because you're firing more, you're having a bigger fire because there's so much energy in this Mars and Aries placement. You can have more chances for success, but that also comes with a lot of failure. And I think part of that is, if you think of Mars's two domiciles, like Mars in Aries versus Mars in Scorpio, Mars in Aries actually has less dignity, technically, if you look at all of the forms of essential dignity that Mars can have. If we're looking at triplicity and decans and terms and all of those other forms. Mars in Aries is a little bit less dignified than Mars in Scorpio, because Mars in Scorpio is more thoughtful and plotting, and is able to be a little bit more precise in the way that it does martial things. So Mars in Aries people just have to be willing to accept failure. And then I think the greatest way to handle that failure is to take failure as a challenge, to meet the next task, and fight the next battle, with the dignity of somebody who just lost. So like being humbled by failure and then taking that failure and using it to energize yourself. I think a lot of times with Aries, there can be difficulty with failure because you just expect to be the best all the time. And there can be some like blindness to the failures that are just naturally a part of life. And so people with a lot of Aries can get down on themselves sometimes when they're not naturally the best. And that's
relatable.
yeah, right. We have Aries moon. We all have Aries placements. So
yeah, we have the sun, moon, and rising.
Yeah. So what do y'all think?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think everything you said resonates a lot. Yeah, so, Scarlett, I want to hear what you think first before I start talking.
Well, yeah, Mars in Aries is Aries as a sign is kind of the most similar to Mars's inherent natural temperament, which is hot and dry, and it's a fire sign as well. So it's a very unadulterated expression of Mars. And one way of thinking about the signs and how to express how the planets express in those signs that Austin Coppock taught me was just like breaking it down to basics and looking at, okay, so Aries is a cardinal sign and it's a fire sign. What is the start of fire? How do you start a fire? And that brings us back to what we're talking about with friction. Like to get a spark, you need friction. And so I think Aries really understands that element of friction and can be very invigorated by that spark, by like Drew was saying, like meeting the challenge. And I think Mars in Aries is like really great when something needs to be done, because it's kind of like, yeah, I'll do it, or they see what needs to be done and they do it, which sometimes that doesn't always work out well, but a lot of the time you do just kind of need to start and act.
It's like a cut to the chase, I think is a good.
Yeah, cut to the chase, exactly. Very direct, a very like direct and outward directional energy. And I think Aries is really invigorated by self-discovery. So I think Mars in Aries kind of forges that sense of self by meeting conflict and rising to the challenge. And they're kind of sustained by that acceleration and excitement, but they might struggle with sustaining that level of energy. It's a very, like the initial output is, so it's like a strong initial output. But
like burnout,
always.
Burnout, right? Like I experience burnout as a Mars and Aries person all the time. And
burnout as an Aries moon. I feel like I always say to people with Aries placements, like burnout is inevitable. That's just the nature of Aries. And yeah, I mean, if like a ram is going to put all of his energy into headbutting that one thing, it's not going to keep doing that for an hour. It needs to put, that's just the energy of Aries. It goes in one direction very quickly in an explosive manner, and then it needs to like collect itself and rest and recuperate, and then build its energy back up to do it again. And I think that's really important to note about Aries energy in general, is that like burnout is inevitable. It's about how you take care of yourself in that burnout stage, and not really getting down on yourself about the fact that you burnt out, because I think that's such a Martian thing. And I tell this to my Martian clients like all the time, especially ahead of this Mars retrograde, but like it's like you feel like you can do it because you can. Like just because you can do it doesn't mean that you need to do it, and also doesn't mean that you need to go balls to the walls with it. Yeah, that's something that I've had to learn myself, and I'm still learning for sure. But yeah, Mars and Aries, I mean, what type of person, like what type of like archetype comes to mind? I think of, I guess this is partly from Austin Kopic's like talking about his book 36 Faces and being in the workshop post Norwalk or post conference workshop at Norwalk. But I think it was just like the axe is the first decan of Aries, and I just picture a guy like, or a person with like a lot of physical strength wielding an axe and kind of just like making their way through thick brush, thick forest, whatever. It's about like clearing a path forward for oneself. And that's kind of the image that comes to mind with Mars in Aries. Also like a warrior on the front lines. Kind of get that old school picture of like, I don't know, someone in like World War I or some shit where, you know, there was like the front lines and, you know, you're charging ahead, and that immense bravery and courage that it takes to be on the front lines of war like that. That's what I think of with Mars and Aries. Does anything else come to mind for you guys?
I think like when I think of Mars, like it's very, and Mars in Aries, very like immediately reactive, which I think, you know, can be a really good quality as well as like can get you in trouble sometimes. But like, I don't know, I see Mars in Aries is like the person who sees someone like fall over and immediately like rushes to their side
First
to help them.
responders.
Yeah, first responders, exactly. Like EMTs and like first responders. They're just kind of like in the moment, in the action. They're not really thinking this like, oh, this needs to be done, this needs to be done.
They're just doing
yeah.
it.
Yeah, they're just doing it. So
I think "Just Do It" was like a Mars and Aries slogan, if I can recall correctly. I remember hearing that like it came out during a Mars and Aries transit or like Mars retrograde or something. We'll have to fact check that.
I have a couple.
Citation needed.
I was just going to say I have a couple of chart examples for Mars and Aries. One of them is the discovery chart for the asteroid Achilles. It has Scorpio rising with Mars and Aries. So actually both example charts that I have are this. It's almost like I'm biased or something because that's what I have. But yeah, Achilles, like the archetypal warrior, like the greatest warrior, but Achilles also has like the one weakness. And so it's interesting to think of like what is Mars and Aries' one weakness? And I think it is this, like, well, there's many weaknesses to Mars and Aries, there's not just one. One of them is this burnout thing that we've been talking about. And then the other one might be like picking fights. Like I think Mars and Aries people tend to be like more combative just naturally. I think this is true of like Mars and fire signs in general. But yeah, Mars and Aries is gonna be willing and quite incensed to go after conflict, even though it might not always be necessary. And then the other chart for Mars and Aries, other than the discovery of Achilles, is Gloria Steinem also has Scorpio rising with Mars and Aries. And so you can see that, so Gloria Steinem is like one of the leading figures in the second wave of feminism I think that's the second wave, right? In the late 60s, or the 60s in general, into the 70s with, I watched, what's the show called? Miss America with Kate Blanchett, and it's like about the ERA getting passed, the Equal Rights Amendment, and Kate Blanchett plays the character who's like trying to stop the ERA, and then Gloria Steinem was one of the people pushing that movement forward. And so there is like a trailblazing quality of Mars in Aries. Like I want to do something, I want to be remembered, I think is also a martial quality. And it definitely comes out in Aries, like wanting to stand out and be uniquely accomplished in some field.
Yeah, in the first, I feel like Aries has this thing of like wanting to be first, wanting to be like a maverick. And yeah, that's something that always comes up with me. I feel like with my moon in Aries, like I noticed as a kid, especially, like I love to be in the front row at school. I love to be like the first in any way. Um, and speaking of me, let's talk about Mars and Scorpio. um, it's
You want
my
to start us
time.
off?
It's my time, guys. No, yeah, I feel like it's hard for me to talk about Mars and Scorpio without talking about Mars and Aries, which is why I wanted to not talk about myself until that until that. Because I like to kind of talk about the difference between Mars in its diurnal domicile in Aries versus its nocturnal domicile in Scorpio. And all the planets, aside from the sun and the moon, have a both diurnal and nocturnal domicile, like two different signs that they, that they call home, you could say. And the difference between Mars and Aries and Mars and Scorpio is that Mars in Aries has that very like external, like forward moving, action oriented quality to it, which comes with like a fire sign. But Mars in Scorpio being in a water sign, and a fixed water sign at that, you get this very slow moving energy. It's not nearly as fast and dynamic as Aries. And Scorpio is, yeah, it's an energy that kind of spirals downward, and I would say in a very slow, almost like sluggish way. There's a lot of stagnation when it comes to Scorpio too, especially when Mars isn't being utilized in Scorpio. You get, backed up, clogged up. But yeah, I like to kind of pull the imagery of the warrior on the front lines as Mars in Aries, to contrast it with, what's a nighttime warrior like? And that's a ninja, that's that's someone who is plotting behind the scenes. You could even say it's like, a hacker or something, someone that's like doing things in a very like almost invisible or non-visible, yeah, that's the same thing, isn't it? Sort of way. And yeah, I think of, in order to fight in the night, you have to be very manipulative, you have to be cunning, you have to be very secretive, quiet, and calculating. And that's really what I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm I hope I don't, I'm a manipulative and calculating person. I mean, definitely calculating, but yeah, in order to be a nighttime warrior, those are the sort of qualities that you have to inhabit. And so, yeah, Mars in Scorpio is about taking action, but it's more about, with Mars in Aries, you're aiming the gun and firing. With Mars in Scorpio, it's like, you're setting up booby traps, and you're waiting perhaps weeks until the target comes along, and there's this focus that comes with it. Yeah, and the way like I interact with my Mars is very much in this like goal oriented sort of way, where I can look at a target that's maybe very, very far away, and somehow find the energy and the stamina to kind of like, yeah, just keep at it. And what that looks like when you're a young Scorpio is like, oh, I want that guy, and I don't care how long it takes. I will have him one day.
I feel like we've talked about this, Kirah.
I'm sure we have. But yeah, it's very much that, like, you know, and, you know, growing up and being a slightly less boy crazy, that looks like, you know, I want to get this sort of job. Or even for me, like as a teenager, I knew I wanted to move to New York City, and I was going to do whatever it took to get to New York City and go to art school in New York City, and I did it. And then I was like, I'm going to get this internship, and I get it. And I'm going to, you know, get this apartment, and I get it. And it's very like goal oriented in that way. And maybe goal oriented isn't the best way but to put it, but it's more about being able to like focus on what you want and then stopping at nothing to get it. And does not matter how long it takes. It's like, I'm going to get there. Yeah. What do you guys think about Mars and Scorpio?
I like that goal-oriented nature. I definitely see that. I think that's martial in general, and I think in Scorpio, what you're describing is like it's so precise and honed in, and it's Scorpio energy is able to like drown out the noise and really focus on what's most important and do just that, as opposed to Mars and Aries, which is just like kind of chaotic and doing like a lot externally. Mars and Scorpio is going to be doing a lot of things internally, with that idea of being a nocturnal, Mars in the nocturnal domicile. There's more internal focus on getting what you want. Mars definitely is a planet about getting what you want and how you go about that. And in Scorpio, it's very focused and precise. I think another thing that came up while you were talking, Kirah, is like this idea of doing battle in the night or like hunting in the night. It's when you're at night, you have to use all of your senses. It's not just about like
adrenaline.
Yeah, like the adrenaline of Mars and Aries versus the or maybe the reflexes of Mars and Aries. Like Mars and Aries is all about reflex. Like, okay, I respond.
Right.
I feel like that first responder idea, but the Mars in Scorpio is more using all of the information to create a singular action. So there's a lot of intake and a very precise output.
Yeah, with that stinger.
Yeah.
You gotta wait for it to come to you.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Scorpion, like what you're talking about with Mars and Scorpio using all the information, Scorpions actually, they don't have like great eyesight, but they have very good low light sensitivity. And so that helps them, they like avoid harsh sunlight, and they're always like hiding under something or hiding in a dark place. But when you meet one, you know it, because you might even know, you might not even know it's there until it stings you.
Yeah.
And I think Mars and Scorpio can be quite disarming, because like with scorpions, it's the really small ones that are the most venomous, not necessarily big ones you have to worry about.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So maybe it's probably the ones like the Mars and Scorpios are, you know, it's not the big scary ones that, you know, dress on all black and have this moody vibe that you need to worry about. They're probably softies.
It's the Ryan Goslings you have to worry about.
Oh yeah.
It's disarming. That's such a Mars and Scorpio, because like Aries, you think of like the natural warrior or the natural combatant, and then like Scorpio, it's more the like, I'm going to take away your weapon so that you can't, you're defenseless against me. That's so cool.
Wow. Oh,
yeah,
I relate
and also
to that
the
so
Scorpio,
much.
like, yeah, because the Scorpion has its own weapon that's like attached to it and inherent. Whereas Mars is like, oh, here's a tool. Aries is like, here's a tool that I'm going to wield and that I'm going to use, that's been forged in fire. Whereas Scorpio is, if we think of Aries as like the forge where you have the metal making it molten and beating it into shape and like plunging it into cold water, and kind of that way of external forging. Then Scorpio is maybe a bit more alchemical, and like inner alchemy is like yeah, being forged in the cauldron of intense and deep and
Regenerative, right?
potentially like frightening emotions and frightening experiences, but finding your power in that. And yeah, and when like, I love how you use the phrase nighttime warrior. I really like that. And it's kind of like, to fight in the dark, you have to be very instinctual. Which the scorpion is very kind of instinctual. It has lots of little hairs on it to pick up on vibrations and whatnot. So yeah.
To go back to, I really like that that like internal idea of the nighttime, and I think what happens internally that Mars and Scorpio is really good at is, earlier I was talking about Mars and Aries, like sometimes like failure is just part of it, and sometimes there's difficulty coming back from failure, and you have to train yourself to be able to do that. I think Mars and Scorpio, bouncing back is much easier because Scorpio is so much about that alchemical process that Scarlett's talking about. And so regeneration, and being able to take experience, take martial experiences of battle and combat, conflict with others,
Pain,
and being able to sharpen the blade, and coming back even stronger. Just is very natural for Mars and Scorpio, and that's why I think Mars and Scorpio is the most dignified Mars, from an essential dignity perspective.
Yeah, and when we're talking about Mars and this idea of bravery and courage too, it's like in Scorpio, it's this emotional bravery and this like willingness to go into the depths of your like emotions and these really intense feelings, that I think Mars and Scorpio is, just like more willing to go there. And that's where you get that, like, the bravery aspect, I guess, of Mars and Scorpio. I mean, something that comes to mind with that for me is like, I've been in so many relationships with people that I know are going to hurt me and that I know are going to not end well. But I do it for the experience, and I have this sort of like, I can get through it sort of like emotional bravery sort of thing, where it's like, I know I have to have this relationship because I need to learn something from it. And Mars is also in the 9th house, so there's that. But yeah, that's something that just came to mind for me, is like this willingness to kind of plunge into these emotional depths.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mars is like, so Mars transforms the conditions of life, whether that's positively or negatively or neutrally, and relationships, and being in that vulnerable space where you're kind of sharing the parts of yourself and that maybe aren't, easy, what you see as easy to love, is very brave. And and letting that kind of motivate you, I guess, as like conflict as being like an invitation to go deeper, and not like shying away from that.
Okay, so we talked about Mars in domicile in both Aries and Scorpio. Let's talk about Mars in its exaltation in Capricorn. I mean, when we're talking about a planet being exalted, it's basically like having conditions that are ideal for it to enact its like will or significations without having to go to an extreme. That's kind of what comes to mind for me. And for Mars and Capricorn, it's like the Saturnian nature of Capricorn, or being ruled by Saturn, kind of gives Mars the boundaries, or like the structure in order to like do Mars and like get shit done like Mars wants to, without really getting sidetracked. How do you guys see it?
Well, with Mars and Capricorn, it's kind of like Capricorn is temperate-wise still dry, but it's cold. So that kind of like cools down Mars a bit, and with like it being ruled, a Saturn-ruled sign, I think it gives Mars a healthy sense of hesitation to like to stand back a bit and be like, okay, what do I want, and what are the necessary steps that need to be taken to achieve that. It's quite strategic, but even though it does stop to think, it doesn't really hesitate to act once it has that plan and once it knows like what it needs to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like bringing up the point about the domicile placements of Mars in Aries and Scorpio being like more prone to excess, and exaltation being a natural condition for moderation. It's interesting because exaltation sounds like it's kind of more, but it's actually quite temperate, and it's like what you're saying, Scarlet, with the coldness of Capricorn being ideal for Mars to be more calculated. Capricorn is one of the, if you think about it from the like Thema Mundi, Capricorn is one of the two coldest signs because it's Saturn ruled and it's opposite the lights. So yeah, Mars and Capricorn, it's just very capable and like together. Like Mars and Aries and Scorpio can be more extreme in terms of like engaging in conflict that's not necessary. But Mars and Capricorn is only going to be conflicting, especially if it's in a night chart, if it's right to have the conflict. And might even be able to avoid conflict in favor of collaboration, which I think is a really positive quality of Mars, to have that cardinality, but it's a receptive cardinality, to be able to put the pieces together, instead of just being the piece.
Yeah, it's very structural in a way, and I think positional as well. Kind of makes me think of chess, where like a good chess player kind of has an idea of the lay of the land of the board, and what are the possibilities for the different moves that they could make, but also what the other person could make, and then adjusting that, and kind of like in terms of how it like relates to the structure of things, I think Mars and Capricorn is really good at positioning themselves for success, or positioning themselves to best resist. Like I think Mars and Capricorn is really good at organizing. So I think they'd be really like shining in kind of resistance efforts, where like I kind of like been thinking about the Hong Kong protests and how they learnt from each like conflict with the police, and how they like collectively organized, even like they put like bricks in the road to like thwart the progress. So, and I think I think Mars and Capricorn is really good at learning from experience, and just being like, oh, okay, so they did this, so what's our next move? How are we going to counter that? It's very strategic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of think of it as like all of the power and like the strength and the grit of Mars to be to be able to be focused and contained and almost like compartmentalized into a specific goal. And I would say like Mars loves a to-do list. Mars just wants to have a job to do, and Martian people love a to-do list because it gives them things to like conquer and check off. And I think Mars in Capricorn is like the ultimate to-do lister, and can like kind of, it gives that container for Mars to, you know, set long-term goals and like have it be, it just feels like very constructive and almost like always focused on that, you know, the top of the mountain peak sort of thing. And also like it's a sign ruled by a fellow malefic. I feel like Mars in Capricorn is like down for the grit and down for the dirty work, and is really looking at it and like the long term. And so almost is like excited about the fact that, you know, it might be a difficult road to get there. It's like down for the down for the long haul, I guess.
Yeah, I was just looking at a chart example for Mars in Capricorn is Frida Kahlo. She has Mars in Capricorn in the 6th, retrograde, conjunct Uranus. So, I mean, Mars in Capricorn in the 6th feels very to-do list. So I don't know sort of like I don't know her biography very well, except for like the famous accident. And there's a 6th house signification right there. She also has a day chart with the sun in the 12th, conjunct Neptune. So
that's rough.
Yeah. But I mean, very accomplished though.
Yeah.
Like climbing the mountain and becoming storied. I think of that with Capricorn as like having a story. And so that Mars mission driven quality of Mars, I think goes very well with Capricorn.
Yeah, one of my really good friends growing up who she, you know, always wanted to be an actress, and that was just like her thing. She has Mars in Capricorn, exactly conjunct her North Node, and she's always wanted to be an actress, and everyone's like, okay, cool, but she's like, no, I'm going to be an actress. And she moved out here to LA, and she's just been working so hard at it, like. And her dream roles, I should say, is like being a badass, like fighter warrior chick, basically. And I'm just like, wow, that's so Mars and Capricorn on the North Node, like this desire to like accomplish. And like, she's just been so focused and so on it for her whole life, basically. And I really do believe she's going to get there. She's going to get that role that, you know, really sets her path ablaze or whatever. But that's what comes to mind a lot when I think. I actually have a couple friends who have Mars in Capricorn, and they're just like such badass bitches, and they like just fight for what they want. And there's very much this like not taking no as an answer sort of vibe to it, which I adore. I love it. As a Mars and Scorpio, I'm like, yes, let's do the thing. Go after your dreams.
I think it's worth like going after it and like being willing to do things alone. Like Mars in domicile or exalted Mars, like malefic energy in general has this quality of being able to do things alone because it has that dryness and that separating quality. So people who have a domicile Mars or an exalted Mars where that dryness is emphasized, I would say especially like Mars in Capricorn, you can imagine like, I don't know, somebody's like being very willing to like start over in a new place, like moving to LA to become an actress and like not knowing anybody there and just like creating your own story from that. I see that with Mars people, is that individualism, totally.
Yeah. As a Mars and Libra, I don't want to do things on my own, but also don't tell me what to do.
Well, to kind of move into like out of Mars and with, you know, good dignity, you can say in domicile or exaltation, the opposite of Mars in exaltation would be Mars in its fall in Cancer. And so, yeah, what does Mars in the sign of its fall or depression look like? Well, I mean, for one, in Cancer, Mars is being ruled by the moon, which is constantly changing. And I think Mars does really well when it has some structure. And the moon kind of just cannot provide that, at least not, maybe not the type of structure that Mars wants. Like maybe the moon can provide a lot of nourishment and, you know, that sort of like, yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily a structure, but I think that, you know, it's a container at least. But Mars in Cancer, you know, a planet in its fall kind of is pushed to extremes in order to try to like play out its significations. And I just see Mars in Cancer being, you know, oftentimes these people were shamed for expressing their Martian qualities, like oftentimes growing up in households where you weren't allowed to express your anger or your frustration, and that was kind of seen as like, you know, a bad thing or like a bad quality to have. What do you guys think about Mars in Cancer?
I think Mars in Cancer, like that quality of Mars in Cancer really gets at the emotional impact of Mars things, like the emotional impact of anger and like severance and like being separated. I don't know, like the first thing I thought of with Mars in Cancer was how Mars in Cancer childbirth is, and like that moment of separation where like the child like comes out of the womb and suddenly it's like separated from this like life-sustaining force of the mother, and then becomes like a separate entity in itself, which it's still, you know, hopefully has like a container to be supported, but also has to kind of learn how to fend for itself. But I guess like for Mars in Cancer, it can be really supported to act when it's emotionally centered and feels like they're maybe like having a vacillating, responsive intention or goal isn't like something to be ashamed of, but it enables you to be quite like sensitive and supple. So it's not really like brute strength. It's like supple, sensitive, responsive action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, emotional strength in that way.
Yeah, and like if you think of the moon as like, yeah, the moon is changeable, and so with Mars in Cancer, the anger and the conflict nature, it goes through ups and downs. So something with Mars in any like kind of debility, you often see people who are very conflict averse, and really try to stay away from situations that are going to bring them into these experiences of shame around what they want. And so they'll like put it on other people to say what they want. But the thing about Mars is that like Mars is not going to be satisfied unless Mars gets what it wants.
Mm-hmm.
And so there can be like, I think resentment is a common thing that comes up for people with Mars in debility, especially Mars in Cancer, because, well, on depression in general, this is something I've learned from Austin Coppock, is that you get kind of the best significations of the planet and the worst. Like you get the like, I want this, I need it this way, like Mars and Cancer, like really demanding comfort and security and a container. But you also get the worst of Mars, where it's like, I don't have the support that I need. I don't have the structure. And I was, yeah, that theme around like feeling ashamed of your own desires is very common. I think both of you brought that up. And not feeling able to like create conflict in healthy ways all the time. And so I think what Scarlett said around like creating situation, like something that if you have Mars in Cancer, like the way that you can work with this is like really leaning into trust and finding people who are going to provide kind of a soft structure that is malleable and is tolerant to the sort of ebbs and flows of your anger, or your needs being kind of your desires fluctuating from one thing to another. So it's really about it's a very relational thing that is going to support people with Mars and Cancer.
Yeah. One of the like archetypes. Well, maybe it's not even an archetype, but yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. Something that comes to mind is like someone that's like very like the defender of the family, and yeah, like having this like really strong need to be like the one that stands up for the family. That's something that comes to mind, or like defend the family name or something like that. That's something that comes to mind with Mars and Cancer. And another thing I see oftentimes with people who are ruled by Mars and Cancer is a lot of like inflammation problems in the body, because it's like that Mars doesn't have like the proper outlet to like release, and so it's like get a lot of external like internal inflammation that can oftentimes show up as skin issues. And I see that a lot with people who are, you know, Scorpio rising and or Aries rising, ruled by Mars and Cancer. And I think it's just really important to try to find ways to like express that Mars and release a lot of that that internal like, you know, fire that can become built up when, you know, you aren't feeling like your fire can be seen. You're not feeling like you can express your anger or your frustration, or even like just like your energy in a way that is supportive.
Yeah, I think Mars and Cancer can be worried about, you know, well, if I do this, then this person will get hurt. And so they're very like emotionally thoughtful in that way. But I think sometimes it can end up that they still kind of go after what they want, but they aren't willing to admit that's what they want. So instead of being direct about it, they go kind of sideways.
Like a crab.
Yeah, like a crab. So, but I think when, you know, well, I think that like Mars and Cancer, I was thinking about Mars being hot and dry, and then Cancer being cold and moist. Like, so this planet and this sign are very in conflict in their inherent natures. But I was thinking about, okay, what can you do with heat and water? And then I was kind of thinking about tea and how like the hot water and the heat helps extract the nutrients from, and like the medicine from the plant. So I think, you know, one of like the potentials of Mars and Cancer is that they can, you know, when they're in tense, emotionally heated situations, instead of lashing out, I think they can also be as equally capable of offering medicine to the other person, or even themselves. Might be harder to offer it to themselves, because I think Mars and Cancer can turn that martial fire inward on themselves, and that kind of relates to what you're talking about with inflammation. So it's kind of like the effect of anger turned inward on itself, I guess.
I like that tea metaphor. When you were saying that, before you said tea, what came to mind for me was like hot coals and like cold water, and how, you know, when there's like a sweat lodge sort of thing where you're like pouring cold water onto these hot coals, and how the steam that arises from that is like this very becomes like this very healing, transformative experience. Yeah, I just wanted to say that that imagery sparked that of like this really hot and dry planet in this very cold and wet environment.
A chart example for Mars in Cancer is Yves Saint Laurent, the French fashion designer, who has Mars in Cancer in the 6th house in a night chart. So like there's some stuff going for it, but it's also opposite his moon in Capricorn in the 12th. And some like a biographical thread for him is that he ended up having a lot of issues with drugs and alcohol, and what he cited as the beginning of that, or like the root of that trend in his life, was when he was asked to join the military, or when he was drafted to be in the military. It was in 1960, and he was sort of like at the beginning of his fashion career, and he had already been like promoted to the head of the Dior fashion house, and he was then drafted, and so he had to go to the military. And he was hazed so badly in the military that he actually had to go to a mental institution where he received like electroshock therapy. Wow. And he had all of these things done to him. And it's like his agency was kind of taken away, and he had no say over the sort of therapies that he was going through. Wow. And then that led to this kind of theme of, I mean, I don't know exactly what it was like for him, but I just think that example of like a military experience gone wrong with Mars in Cancer seems really fitting.
And not having the agency, like it's such like a fallen Mars thing.
But he was still able to achieve like massive success. And so just because you have Mars in Cancer doesn't mean that you don't have, and he obviously worked incredibly hard to get it, and he was very creative. And,
Mars rules his 10th then, right? If he's an Aquarius rising.
Yeah. Good point. That's really good point. He also has Jupiter in Sag conjunct his midheaven, so there's some other stuff going on.
That helps.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Mars in detriment. Scarlett, you have the floor to talk about Mars in Libra if you would like.
Yes, Mars in Libra. Yeah, I've been thinking about Mars in Libra. When I was looking for inspiration and I don't know, just like other perspectives on Mars. And I was reading an article by Alice Sparkley Cat, and they wrote, we are taught that our truths are disruptive and that disruption is a negative act. This one is particularly insidious. And I think like Mars is disruption, and I think Mars in Libra is really like sensitive to disruption, and they don't want to disrupt like the social contract, and they don't want to disrupt they don't want to disrupt but often they end up disrupting, or at least I don't know, that's my personal experience. Might be colored by it being my ascendant ruler.
That makes
I
sense,
think
though.
Mars in Libra is like, there's like hesitation because Mars in Libra knows that by selecting one course of action, they're like saying no to all these other courses of action, which can be hard for Mars in Libra because it's like, well, what if that's like the better thing to do, or like, what if like this happens, or but I think, you know, that does make Mars in Libra really good at considering and taking into account multiple viewpoints, which can be really useful interpersonally, but maybe sometimes to the non-Mars in Libra person in the situation can be a bit frustrating when Mars in Libra won't necessarily definitively take a side, because Mars in Libra can kind of often understand both sides.
I've been with like way too many men with Mars in Libra. And that's like a very real thing, is like, for one, there's this passive aggression that's like very much a thing with Mars in Libra, like not wanting to be outright aggressive, quote unquote, or confrontational. And it kind of becomes, it becomes very passive, which is like a Libra, a Venus thing. Another thing that comes to mind, well, for me, when I think of Mars in the sign of, in Venus's sign, there's this need to make your like Martianness, your wield your sword, I guess. Like you have to do it in a very artful way. And my dad has Mars in Libra conjunct his North Node, and he is a 6th degree black belt in karate. So literally, and he's also a Scorpio like me. So he's ruled by this Mars in Libra on the North Node, and he does martial arts. And he's always been, he's been doing it for decades. He's turning 80 in just 2 months, and he's a 6th degree black belt. There's only like 10 degrees. So yeah, that's one way I see it playing out, is like this, a lot of the guys that I've been with Mars and Libra are artists, and partly I went to art school and that's where I met all of them, so there's that. But there's this like, especially a lot of them do collage art too. So there's like this cutting and like severing and like building of something. And this, the end product is like this beautiful piece of art. So that's kind of also how I see Mars and Libra playing out. Also with like, that can be with music too, like anything where you're taking it and you're doing Mars things to it, cutting it, severing it, manipulating it in some way. And then the outcome is this very like Venusian beautiful thing. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I love that about like disassembling and reassembling, because it's like I feel like that's using the tools of Venus, like using these different art forms and then bringing them together into something that expresses that person's individuality. Feels very, very apt. I think that, yeah, passive aggression, I've seen that for sure. But it's like people with Mars and Libra are so concerned with keeping the peace that I mean, they're actually very good usually in social situations, and like in groups especially, they're very good with like going with the direction of the tide. Whereas like somebody with Mars and Aries like me is going to like stick out more in a group and might find it difficult in social situations. But Mars and Libra people I've noticed are really good at getting consensus before taking action and making sure that everybody's on board. They're very cooperative. It's just a matter of like, is it possible to continue and sustain that cooperation without having some other outlet in your life to be able to express Mars in the way that Mars needs to be expressed. So I like that example, Kirah, of your dad. And I think that example raises this more general point about having Mars in debility. Like it's not, it doesn't mean that you can't do Mars, because everybody does every planet, no matter where that planet is in your chart. Like the planet is a part of you. And I think that the best thing that people with Mars and debility can do is like practice Mars, to hone their Mars in using like a practice like martial arts, because that develops your relationship with that sphere to be stronger. And it's really important to honor that planet in your life and learn about that planet and what it wants to do, so that you can still do like what comes naturally to you, while having this balance between yourself and the other.
One of my really good friends, Germ, he is an Aries rising with Mars and Libra. He's a Virgo, so he has a night chart, but he's a very, very, very successful photographer, and he does portraiture specifically. And that just came to me today. I had a client earlier who's Aries rising with Mars and Libra, and I was like, yeah, I mean, my friend, he literally shoots people for a living, which is so Martian. Like but he's like so relationship oriented and like has so many friends. And yeah, like that's kind of almost his downfall sometimes, is that he has so many friends and he has a really hard time, like, you know, choosing. Like we were on the phone yesterday and he's like, I was like, are you gonna do anything for your birthday? Like, you know, like a Zoom party? And he's like, yeah, but I would just end up inviting like everyone I know. And that's usually what he does for his birthday every year, is he'll just have a house party, because he can't just like do a dinner, because he just has so many friends and he can't like choose who to pick. So yeah, he's someone that's like I would say hyper relationship oriented, and is like constantly seeking out connections with people, which is very Martian. I think that speaks to like having Mars in a night chart too. That's a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, it's like he shoots people. He shoots people for a living, and again, it's like in this very artful, beautiful way. So
I love that. And I love
yeah.
like he shoots people for a living, but it's like in a Venus way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Another thing with Mars and Libra is like, I think Mars and Libra is really aware of how each action or each inaction affects not just themselves but affects other people. They're like very aware of like, you know, how like if I do this will affect this person. And maybe they like kind of are thinking about it a bit too much sometimes, that it leads them to just be like paralyzed and like not being sure what to do.
Mm-hmm. I've
And I
definitely
think
seen
about
that.
like with Mars is like how we, you know, survive. It's like our survival is instincts. But relationships are like so important to that and so vital to that. And you kind of have to like, sometimes you have to risk that conflict. But conflict can, you know, it doesn't have to be like a severance of this relationship with this person. It can be like an invitation to get to know that person more, but also like offer a bit more of yourself to them. Like not just having like oh, this is how I need to be, so I'm going to act like this. Like offering more of your true self, and receiving that in return, and not seeing, you know, difference as something that is bad. Yeah.
Let's use that to kind of transition into Mars and its other sign of detriment, Taurus, which is another like placement that I'm constantly surrounded by. I have this weird thing where like I'm always attracting people with Mars opposite my Mars. So like I have Mars at 22 Scorpio. My sister's, her Mars is at like 19 Taurus. My ex, his Mars is at 21 Taurus. Like I have a lot of friends actually who have Mars and Taurus, and I see that playing out in a lot of different ways. I mean, there is this like, I hate to say it, but like stubbornness with it, but it's not stubborn just for the sake of being stubborn. It's more, I think, about like being extremely deliberate with the way that they're extending their energy, and basically not wanting to waste it, and you know, really only feeling compelled to act in like very specific circumstances. How do you guys see it?
I think it's like a piece. Like I think whenever Mars is in a Venus sign, there's like this desire to keep the peace. And with Mars and Libra, it was more like keeping the peace to maintain connection. And I think with Mars and Taurus, it's a little bit more personal. It's like keeping the peace so that I can continue to be safe. Like keeping things on the surface because the depths are scary. And I don't know, like Mars and Taurus is, I think, yeah, the stubbornness comes with the territory there, because when we think about like needs being met on this like Scorpio Taurus axis. You have like the material needs and then the emotional needs. That stuff runs very deep, and it's very instinctual, and it's very survival oriented. So I think the stubbornness comes from that place of like conserving what you have, not stretching yourself too thin. But on the other hand, Mars in Taurus can be, I don't know, kind of sexy, honestly. Maybe I say this because I'm like Mars, I'm Venus in Taurus, so it's like my natural like match in a way. But yeah, there's like a slowness and a sensuality to the desires of Mars and Taurus people. Yeah, like I think of like a really luscious meal, and like taking. Oh, I have a friend who has like a lot of. He doesn't have Mars in Taurus, but he has a Taurus. He has multiple planets in Taurus, ruled by Mars in Cancer, and he worked at Burger King all through high school, and. He told me this story one time that his manager like got really mad at him one time because he was like taking so long to make the burgers. He just wanted them to be the most beautiful burgers.
Put the pickles like perfectly.
Yeah. Make the pickles super pickly, like put a smiley face on the burger. And that just feels very like it has that Mars instability quality where it's like, yeah, you're slowing down to do the Mars. You're slowing down in your actions, in your martial actions, like doing
to make it beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Because
my ex is like that so much.
Wouldn't it be nice if everything could just be like really cute and cuddly? But obviously, it's life isn't all the time, and I think admitting the sort of nastiness of life can be really beneficial for people with Mars and Taurus because it like forces them to get off their ass.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when I think of Mars and Taurus, it's like heat in the senses. It's like very like Eros and like very desire minded, I guess. Like Mars and Taurus is like, oh, I want that, I desire it, I want to keep this, so I'm going to do what I can to maintain that. I think they can be a bit resistant to changing it up. It might be hard for Mars and Taurus to change their tactics. Yeah, like once they decide, like, oh, I'm doing it like this, it's pretty difficult to change that.
Definitely, yeah. There's also this like resourcefulness that comes with Mars and Taurus too, where they can like they just seem to be able to make a lot out of a little, and they can make it taste good or smell good or like just be pretty, even if they don't have a lot to begin with. I have a lot of friends with Mars and Taurus who like. I have one friend in particular who has it in the 5th house, and she used to come over, like she was not houseless, but like didn't have a place in New York to stay, so she would stay with me a lot when she was in the city. And I wouldn't have much in my cupboards or anything, but she would just find shit and be like, I'll be like, oh, we can order food. And she's like, no, wait, like go through my cupboards and like somehow find something. It's like, I can make something out of this. And my ex was like that too. He was just like, we don't need to spend money on that. We can, we have this at home. We can make this. We have a little bit of that, a little bit of that. I can make it work. And that's something that like just does not compute with me. Maybe because I don't cook, but I mean, I can cook, but I can't cook. I definitely prefer others to do that for me. But yeah, that's definitely the resourcefulness piece comes to mind.
Yeah, I think of I think of Taurus being related to accumulation and cultivation. And so Mars can bring some strategy into that. But like Scarlett said, what if you needed to change the base, like what you're accumulating, or the strategy, like what if the strategy doesn't work and you actually need to be focusing on something else? That comes to mind.
That's where this Uranus transit comes in.
Yeah.
Everyone, Mars and Taurus is getting Uranus at some point if they haven't already. And I see that a lot with clients, like, you know, anyone who has Taurus placements really, but especially the Mars and Taurus, like once that hits, it's like, what the fuck's happening to my life? This is not okay and it's not fair and I don't want this to change.
Yeah,
which is totally valid.
It makes me think of like a scarcity mindset, maybe like with Uranus coming up to some of these Mars and Taurus. It's like, are you afraid of having enough? And if so, like how can that fear be sort of like transmuted into action instead of like, you know, mental gymnastics or like real anxiety? It's like what's the next thing that you can do, and like using that cultivating nature of Taurus to actually do something about it. I think it would be helpful if you're having Uranus transit over your Mars.
Awesome. And with that, maybe we can talk a little bit about like just how to work with Mars in general, you know, especially people who might have it in a difficult place, maybe, you know, opposite their moon or like conjunct their chart ruler or something like that. Like, or maybe just like, you know, in a difficult aspect with another planet. How can people tap into Mars and work with it?
Well, I think one thing I think of is like if you're having like, so Mars is like, you know, Mars isn't just, you know, like jumping into battle with your sword. Like it's also like just kind of getting out of bed and like finding the inner fire to just like be like, okay, I can do this. I can, you know, get out of bed. I can
Get in
go.
the shower.
Yeah, I can get in the shower. That's like the very basic Mars thing. So if you're like, that's like, I think a good place to start is just like what small actions can you take to get that fire started? And there is kind of like with Mars, something I think about is how you can strengthen through resistance and like strengthen by doing the kind of opposite.
Oh, just to use that space of vulnerability. I think we talked about that with Mars, with your own fears and really feeling those and feeling where those lie in the body and engaging with the images that come up and the stories that you remember from your life and connecting to survival instincts. It's really helpful just to acknowledge the things that you're afraid of. I mean, Mars is also about just like death too. Like Mars puts us in dangerous situations sometimes, but it puts us there. It puts us in dangerous situations because we need to be in danger sometimes in order to thrive. If you're not put in a situation that challenges you, you're never going to grow. And so being able to work through fear and to be brave in dangerous situations, and also to be able to ask for help. A lot of times people who are excessively martial are really bad at admitting that they can't do it themselves. And so if you are one of those people, or you generally have trouble asking for help because you don't want to be a burden, that is really important, like confronting fears and being able to ask other people to help you with your fears also.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scarlet.
Oh, well, I was reading some of West Arteray's blogs. They did a series of blogs when Mars was back in Capricorn. and they like were describing how how a lot of us have been forced to remove no from our vocabulary. Like customer service workers, you have to smile and you can't say no. You can never say no. And there's like stigma on certain people when they get angry, where like their anger is not accepted as right, as correct, or like the right way to handle things. So yeah, I think that's like something to consider as well, is just like, you know, how society's expectations of anger affect how we express it. And, you know, maybe it's not always safe for us to express our anger, and, you know, seeking out those places where it is safe for us to have like healthy generative conflict, where you can trust that the other people around you aren't going to reject you just because you disagree, or reject you because you're passionate about something that deeply affects you. I think physical expression, like giving Mars like a physical outlet, can be really helpful as well. Because Mars is like, I think, a lot to do with movement, like moving towards something, like the outward energy output. So something like physically expressive or like viscerally expressive, whether that's like exercise or like, I don't know, maybe like for Mars and Taurus, like singing or like playing an instrument, or even like crying for Mars and Cancer. Like it's okay to cry when you're mad, because it is, you know, deeply affecting. Yeah, finding outlets for
Primal
martial
scream.
expression. Yeah, primal scream
That's something
therapy.
that I've been like craving. Once once the pandemic isn't as terrible as it is, one day I really want to go to one of those like smash rooms or something that you can just like break shit. That's
Oh my
something
God,
I'm
yes.
craving so badly, and just be able to like scream and, let it all out, because Mars and Scorpios retains a lot. I think that's like a good place to leave it. I loved all of your suggestions there, and I think it's really going to be helpful for people around this Mars retrograde, especially. So, thank you both so much for doing this with me. I love you both so much, my
Thank you.
Martians.
It was a pleasure, my
Well,
fellow bold and daring Martian brethren.
yeah,
Flame.
we've been on this for like 2.5 hours. Like this podcast, I don't think is that long, but we've had to pause a couple times, and you guys have been such good sports and enduring with me. So so thank you.
It was really fun.
Yeah, I love talking to you guys. So
Yeah, I mean,
anytime.
we've done this for hours and hours and hours. So this is the
Yeah.
first time it's been recorded, but yeah, why don't you tell everyone where you can find you? Scarlet, where can everyone find you?
Yeah. So where you can find me, you can find me on Twitter at Luna_Aquarius, where I share my thoughts of varying quality and discernment. On Instagram, I'm at Scarlet_Astrology. And I also have a website now, which I'm working on, but it does have a pretty front page. Looking to add more stuff there in the coming months, but that's scarletcoote.com. So ScarletCoote.com.
And we'll have that linked in the show notes too. How about you, Drew?
Yeah, I'm on social media, on the Twitter and the Instagram at Anthrosophist, like anthro, and then sophist, Sophist. If that doesn't come through for some reason, then you can also find my social stuff on my website, where you can find me at drewlevanti.com, which will direct you to the place where I have my offerings available for the different astrology offerings I have at rkastrology.com. That's ARCHE astrology.com. And yeah, I'd love to connect with people in whatever way they want.
And Drew, you kind of like specialize right now in electional, in additional to natal. And Scarlet, do you do consultations?
I do consultations, but I don't have any public offerings at the moment. I'm working on that. So watch
Cool.
that space.
Awesome. Well, once you do have it up, I'm sure people will be booking you up. And same with you, Drew. Everyone should check out both Scarlet and Drew. They're, as you've probably noticed, amazing astrologers, and I'm so lucky to be friends with them. So thanks again, guys. So happy to have you.
Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Kirah.